ultimately. So now I just want to do a quick introduction of Dennis Mudd, who I'm so happy he was willing to speak with us tonight. Um, I was just blown away on a garden tour when I had a chance to see what he did at his property. It's just amazing. Dennis is a self-taught native plant enthusiast, and he founded Calscape in 2010 with the goal of enabling small-scale nature restoration efforts in California. So the site primarily focuses on showing homeowners which plants are likely to thrive in their particular location, basically anywhere in the state. Calscape is now the largest California native plant website with over 2 million users. And Dennis is currently the co-director of the Smart Food Foundation, a nonprofit that provides healthy food, cooking, and nutrition education to low-income communities in San Diego, and is also an avid mountain biker. And in his prior life, he was co-founder and CEO of the digital music companies Slacker and Music Match. And his native garden in Poway won the San Diego Home and Gardens Garden of the Year Award in 2012. And it's truly remarkable. And if it comes up on another garden tour, I highly recommend you go see it in person. But we're happy to have you here and have a chance to learn more about how you made it all happen.
Right. Well, thanks very much, Sally. I really appreciate it. It's great to be able to talk about native plants. I apologize for the kind of angle, but I could not get my camera to work, so I'm using a phone to talk and to show my face. But I guess now the best thing is to share my presentation, I believe. So let's see. All right. Can everybody see the presentation?
It's coming.
It's coming.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, well, great. Well, I want to talk about sort of this concept of nature restoration landscaping, which is the sort of the principle and the strategy that I gradually evolved to over time. And what I'm going to talk about is the process that I went through. Really, it was kind of a lot of trial and error and a lot of dead plants, but a process that I went through to figure out what I thought was the best way to grow native plants in San Diego, or really in California, maybe all over the world, but especially California and especially San Diego. So let's just get into it. All right, for me, it started with mountain biking. I grew up really not knowing anything about nature. I was a basketball player, and I didn't really know anything about the wildlife of San Diego. I didn't know anything about the plant life of San Diego. And then I started getting out into nature. And the more I was in nature, the more I realized I loved it. I love San Diego. I love the plants. I love the feeling. I became relaxed. And gradually, I decided that I wanted to have a garden that was more like the nature that I had fallen in love with in San Diego County. And my starting point was a fairly kind of typical California type of a landscape with a lot of palm trees and grass, no natives whatsoever. There was some, an invasive area with a bunch of acacia, but you can see that this was really about as far as you could possibly be from a natural sort of environment as you could think there could be. But for me, one of the things that I really wanted is the peaceful vibe of nature. And I did a little bit of research as I was trying to understand why it was just so wonderful to be in nature. And it really is, it's not just me, it's most people in the world. The more time you spend in nature, the happier you are, the more you're more feeling of well-being and just overall happiness. And so it made sense to me, and I decided to really do it. And about 15 years ago, I decided that I wanted my garden to look like nature. And after my second digital music company, I had some time, and I said, okay, let's do it. I hired a contractor, and I said, I want my yard to look like nature. And I found out how little information there is about what California native plants or gardening kind of with nature is. And the first pass, I went back to work for a while again, and I came back and I saw what my contractors had done, and it was really not nature at all. There was no native plants. They were basically South African and Australian and drought-tolerant plants, but nothing really that actually naturally belongs in San Diego. You can see the feathergrass, you can see the kangaroo pods and butterfly bush and a lot of non-native but somewhat drought-tolerant sort of plants. And that wasn't what I wanted at all. And so the next step for me was really learning a little bit more about native plants, well, actually a lot about native plants. And I read about the cultivars, and I read about the beautiful sort of California natives that were available primarily from nurseries. And they really were beautiful. The flowers were fantastic, just amazingly beautiful plants, but they all died. It was one of the most traumatic gardening experiences that I've ever had. So probably several years, I tried to make this work. I tried everything, different irrigation strategies and different placements. But what I found is that for the most part, the cultivars that are sold in nurseries, particularly the larger shrubs, like the great ceanothus, they're really native to Central California, usually the Central California coast. And I think you can probably just get by with it maybe along the coast of San Diego County, but when you're inland like me, they just aren't right. They're not the right plants. They can't handle the much shorter, the much longer drought period, the much higher temperatures, and they're stressed out, and then rats and other animals that will kind of eat the leaves will give them diseases, and they end up dying. So I'd say probably of the 500 cultivars that I planted over this period of time, all but about 3 or 4 were dead within 3 or 4 years. So that brought me on to a whole other strategy. I started to do a lot of research about what plants naturally belong in my location in Poway. And I stopped planting cultivars, and I started planting only like the true natives, and the true natives that belong not just in San Diego County, but in my particular climate zone, my particular climate, in fact, my exact area. So plants that grew just a couple miles away from where I lived in the remnant canyons that are around this area. And at that point in time, I saw plants stop dying. I started seeing animal life come in, like just in an amazing way. And I stopped having to work. I stopped having to cut down dead plants and go to the dump. And it became a much, much easier experience and much more beautiful. So for me, what I found is the most important kind of strategy, if you could describe it in one very short phrase, what's the best way to do nature restoration landscaping? And it's to mimic nature. Most importantly, choose the plants that really naturally belong exactly where you live. You're pushing uphill if you grow plants that don't really belong in your unique climate. And the only way to do that is to find the ones that actually grow exactly where you are. And there's a lot of them, but I'll get into that a little bit more. The next is irrigation, and irrigation is very important. There's, a natural way to irrigate, and then kind of a mimicking nature, and then there's artificial irrigation. And I found that natural irrigation is absolutely critical for a native landscape and native plants that are going to live for a long time. Same with natural weed control, natural mulching, and natural pest control, all mimicking nature. And I'll describe those each in just a few minutes. So first of all, I think, again, the most important thing is choose the plants that naturally belong where you live. So the same climate, moisture, drainage, sun conditions, and ecological relationships. I'm sure that you all know that California is not just one climate. There are amazingly different climates all across the state. It ranges from just a few miles away, much more mild climates right along the coast, and much colder, rainier climates as you get away from the coast until the desert. So anyway, it really comes down to finding exactly what your climate is, down to the square mile. And that's really was the driver behind Cowscape. we have this information mostly from the California Consortium of Herbaria. Millions and millions of observations have been collected on plants in California in their natural environment over the last like almost 150 years. They go back to the 1850s when Jepson was traveling through California. And we use that information to plot out the climate zones for every one, not the climate zones, but actually the square miles extrapolating to similar, to really identical nearby climates from the known observations. And so filling in, we know plants grow in certain square miles, and we fill in the zone, we fill in the plant range to the square miles that are very, that all have climates that are virtually identical to the nearby observations. And so it allowed us to create plant maps for every one of the different plants, like this one, like this Penstemon spectabilis that I grow in San Diego and California. Okay, so that's part of it. You can go to CalScape and you can type in the name of type in your address, and it'll tell you exactly which plants grow in your location. And there's typically 500, 600, 700 plants that will be native to just about anyone's location, and maybe about half those that are available in nurseries. So it makes it a lot easier to pick the plants that likely will grow and likely thrive in your particular site. But that really is only half the battle, because just because you're growing a plant that's in the right climate does not mean that it's going to be very happy unless it gets the right sun exposure, the right soil drainage, and the right soil moisture. What I found is, whether it's the pH doesn't matter that much, but drainage really does matter. A lot of plants require a lot of great drainage, whether it's on a slope or on kind of more sandy soil. Plants are very picky about whether they have a high amount of sun or part shade or full shade. And same with moisture. There's plants that have evolved to grow in different moisture conditions within their overall range. Sometimes they'll be on north-facing slopes, sometimes near drainages, and so you can use CalScape to find all those kind of micro site sort of variables. So you can find the plants that will grow well in the sun environment that you want to plant them in, the drainage, as well as the soil and moisture. And through these tools, you really can find the plants that are most likely to thrive in your environment. And for me, that was critical. Okay, so the next is irrigation. Irrigation is the easiest way for people to kill native plants. And most people like to irrigate natives like they irrigate their non-native plants, which is you water them every few days or every day or every week, whether it's sunny or not, whether it's hot or not, and that just doesn't work with California natives. Most California natives will die if you water them in the summer, especially if you give them a lot of water. And it took me a while to figure that out, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But still, there's a lot of plants, particularly ones that are kind of somewhat near riparian areas, or they grow in north-facing slopes, or the bottom of kind of canyon sides where there's more subterranean water flow. They don't grow in the driest conditions. And if you don't have a drainage that goes through your property, and your soil is kind of dry all around, if you don't artificially irrigate it, it makes it a very difficult situation, because the plants may need more water than they're going to get in a site that has no natural drainages left. And normal irrigation patterns of just watering the whole area quite a bit don't work either. And so what's the solution? And it really all starts with mycorrhizal fungi. Mycorrhiza, certainly in California and especially in San Diego, has evolved to grow and to thrive in conditions where it is dry when it is hot. So they just can't tolerate hot, wet conditions. The mycorrhiza will die. As it turns out, nearly all California native plants, non-riparian California native plants, need healthy mycorrhiza in order to survive through through the dry, hot summers that we have. If you have healthy mycorrhiza in your property, in your garden, everything is easier. The mycorrhiza, of course, they're very necessary for micronutrient exchange. The mycorrhizal fungi that live in the roots will actually they'll convert the minerals in the soil into a form that the roots of the plant can ingest, and it's absolutely, so it's critical just for nutrient absorption, but it's also critical for water absorption. You can kind of think as mycorrhizal fungi as root extensions, very, very fine root extensions that go out, and they are able to absorb much, much more water than a plant can just with normal roots. The mycorrhizal fungi also store water in the soil and make it available for plants in dry periods, and they repress weeds and soil pathogens. They even, you know, this is amazing, but they found that mycorrhizal fungi put out pheromones when the host species are under attack, and they will call insect predators or other predators that can get the system back into balance. It's a phenomenal and kind of somewhat magical interconnected system, but it's really the foundation for life on the planet, is this interconnected relationship between mycorrhizal fungi and plants. So, so step one is you've got to create the conditions for a healthy mycorrhizal fungi in your garden. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but number one is don't kill all your mycorrhiza by watering your garden overall, you know, broadly watering it during warm weather. It really needs to be very indirect water, where maybe you allocate just a few percent of your property, of your garden, for being wet. So it should be 98, 99% dry as a bone on the surface anyway, in the summer, and just a very small 1-3% areas that are wet, that hold water in the winter, and they even could be irrigated in the summer. So then it's amazing how fast and how far non-riparian plants can stretch out their roots to moist areas. So you can put an oak tree 20 feet away from the catch basin like this, and before you know it, you don't have to provide any nearby water at all to the oak, because it's gone on. Its roots have gotten over to the moist area. It's true for shrubs, toyons, for just about every plant larger shrub you can think of. So kind of the bigger the plant and the bigger the tree, the farther it can be away from a catch basin. And then smaller plants, you know, maybe put 2 or 3 away from moist or slightly irrigated areas. The other thing that really helps a lot is to plant some deep-rooted shrubs and trees to bring water up to the surface from deeper groundwater. Oaks are fantastic, but most of the California native shrubs can reach down 10, 20, even 30 feet sometimes in order to bring deep water up. And basically what happens is you're uplifting water through the root systems. The water is actually shared into the soil to the shallower rooted shrubs and perennials, smaller shrubs and perennials. And so this is what my irrigation system looks like. I was lucky enough to have a seasonal creek at the bottom of the property. That's one of the few continuously pretty wet areas. And then I constructed this bioswale you can see in the front yard. It's kind of an area that's actually irrigated, but it also captures a lot of rainwater in the winter. And I have little bubblers that are spread out in these bioswales. I also have bubblers that are up against the area, the closest area to the house. So I do keep a little strip near the house a little bit more irrigated, because I want those plants to be particularly verdant during the entire year, so they're not a fire hazard. I have a lot of deep-rooted trees and shrubs that, as the trees have gotten bigger and bigger, they pull up more and more moisture to the surface areas. And just like in this designated riparian area in the middle of our back patio, that I keep very wet. There's some willows in there and riparian plants. but the other plants reach their roots out to that designated riparian area as well. So again, 98% of the area is dry as a bone during the summer, but there are the small number of irrigated, designated riparian or bioswale areas. Okay. All right, natural mulching. There's a lot of discussion, particularly in the native plant world, about the best kind of mulch. A lot of people like wood chips or gorilla hair. And what I found is by far the best way is just let plants create their own mulch as quickly as possible. Add rocks right around you can add rocks right around the root balls for new plants if you want, but and I have done that quite a bit. Rocks, almost all native plants like rocks fairly nearby. But once they're established, the plants are going to create their own organic mulch, and especially if you plant closely, the soil is not going to get as much direct sun, and the soil is not going to dry out, and then this leaf litter that's all around the plants will also keep the soil shaded and keep it from drying out as much as well. And this is really it's amazing how much faster. I've tried both ways, by the way. I've tried wood chips and gorilla hair as well as natural mulch, and it's amazing how much faster the native mycorrhizae grow when they're growing in natural mulch and natural leaf litter as opposed to wood chips and gorilla hair. And this is how you know that there's a lot of mycorrhiza in your soil, because up come these amazing mushrooms. And you can see these are all in my yard. They're just crazy mushrooms that are just pushing up from all different areas. There's literally a dozen species that now of mycorrhiza that now grow around the roots and all throughout the garden of the property. And as I see more and more mushrooms and I know more and more mycorrhiza is in the soil, I see that my plants get healthier and healthier. And really now it's so easy, I could just put a plant in the ground and I never have to worry about it again. I put a 1 gallon plant in the ground and it just grows as long as I start it up in the beginning of the dry season. I never have to water new plants anymore. Okay, and then the natural weed control. So weeds are a problem, especially if you have wet soil all year round. But if you allow the majority, like 98% of your ground to just be as dry as a bone, weeds just aren't going to grow. You'll get fewer and fewer weeds and fewer seeds, and before you know it, you won't have to worry about the weeds at all. Definitely have to, except the riparian areas. You will have weeds almost always in riparian areas because they're wet, and there's a lot of weed seeds around. But gradually you'll have fewer and fewer. I never weed except in the just a few times a year, and just pull a few weeds from my riparian areas. And occasionally I'll do a little bit of weeding in the winter, but never any summer weeding for 98% of the ground. And another really important thing is to avoid Roundup. It will kill your mycorrhiza, and if your mycorrhiza is dead, it will not. You'll see a lot more weeds that are growing in your property. I should have mentioned, I might have done that in the previous slide, but mycorrhiza does a great job of repressing weeds. A healthy mycorrhiza will excrete chemicals that kill weeds and prevent them from becoming a problem. So another reason why you want mycorrhiza is to avoid weeds. And another thing that you've got to worry about in the beginning, particularly the beginning, before you get a natural working balanced ecosystem, is rodents. And rodents can be a real drag. They're particularly early on, plant a bunch of plants, and then before you know it, rabbits and rats had eaten so many of them down to just the base. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. But as more and more native plants grew, I saw, and we had too many rodents. You start to see predators come. So tons of owls, of hawks, of coyotes. We even have, this is a picture of a bad picture, but a picture of a bobcat that just showed up. There's actually a pair of bobcats. I think they have kittens somewhere on the property, and they they keep the rodents under control. I'm at the point now where I wish I had more rodents because they do such a good job of attracting so many cool raptors and now bobcats as well as coyotes. And this was even had a great horned owl family that is still living right in this property, and you hear them do the great horned owl call and response all the time. But it's amazing that you start to think of of rodents less as a pest, and now I think them as food for attracting one of the coolest parts of the whole property is just the wildlife that is attracted, and particularly the raptors and the coyotes and the bobcats. Sometimes nature does come a little bit too close. We had another bad picture of a great horned owl that decided to fly into the house. Just did a couple of laps around the living room before it flew out. Natural insect control, that, it's less of an issue. Insects will start to eat some of the leaves, but they never really do that much damage. And before you know it, very quickly, they will attract massive numbers of insect predators, and as well as birds. Hummingbirds and insect predators, spiders especially, will just attract, will definitely keep the insect herbivores under control. And not only that, a lot of the insects are extremely cool. The butterflies are fantastic. They're beautiful. The bees are amazing. So it really is this just great web of life that has started to grow. Actually now it's pretty in balance. But I kind of gradually moved from being a plant lover to seeing the animals as the star of the show. And I just like to sit out with my wife, and we'd crack a bottle of wine, and we'd just see the butterflies and the birds, and occasionally a bobcat and coyote just running around. And it's really becoming a magical place. And lots of butterflies. And what I've learned with butterflies is that, insect herbivores in general, they're really pretty critical for building up the ecosystem, especially of birds. So if you don't have, one of the things that for most insect herbivores, they're dietary specialists. They've evolved to eat the leaves of only a small number of species that they co-evolved with. So every plant has its own mechanical or chemical defenses against insect herbivores. And particular insect herbivores evolved ways to overcome those defenses. But you have like this everyone knows about monarchs. They can only eat milkweeds, but it's true for almost all the insect species. They have particular kind of plants like this Lorcan's admiral in the middle. It can only eat the leaves of oaks and willows, and it goes on and on and on. So if you don't plant native plants that actually, and especially the native plants that evolved in a particular area that you're growing, it's unlikely that the insect herbivores are going to be able to eat those leaves. And if they don't eat those leaves, they're not going to have larvae. And if they don't have larvae, then you're not going to see a lot of birds, because I guess that's the next slide. Yeah, 96% of terrestrial bird species depend on insects to feed their young. So if there's no insect herbivore larvae, you're not going to see many birds. And without any birds, without our native plants and their co-evolved insect herbivores, our natural ecology will collapse. So you really can, it's not that difficult. You can do your part with your own garden, plant native plants, attract insect herbivores, and you will find yourself supporting a very, very large population of birds. And certainly that's what I've seen in my own property. The birds are probably the most fun of all the things we get to watch, but we have well over 50 bird species that we've identified in the last 2 years. There are more bird species in my garden than just about any bird sanctuary that I've visited, at least on you know, a single square mile sort of basis. One other thing, it's kind of, it's a little bit of a more difficult thing, but if you get a chance, it's great to convert your pool to a pond. And this is just one slide, but you can see that before I converted the pool to a pond, it was really out of place with a natural garden. All you have to do is unplug the filter, put a bunch of plant roots in, and then move water through those plant roots. And before you know it, you've got crystal clear water, and you'll have even more birds you can ever imagine, and particularly aquatic birds. And so this has bass and bluegill and minnows, and because of that, we have tons of aquatic sort of birds. Even had a belted kingfisher that came into the property just a little while ago. Okay, and if you can't add a pond, add a fountain. It's a lot easier, but you can do the same sort of thing. Put a bunch of plants in a recirculating fountain, and you'll see so many birds. It's truly amazing. Hummingbirds, orioles, just western bluebirds. It's the single kind of coolest little area to be able to see a lot of bird species in my property. Okay, so just to show you just some pictures of kind of this what my garden looks like. Sally got a chance to look at it the other day. You know, we're on garden tours every year or so. I'd love to have everybody come and take a look, but it really is a beautiful garden, and it kind of shows that even if you don't have some of the fancier cultivars, you can have just with the true native plants that actually belong in my location of Poway, you can have a garden that is truly spectacularly beautiful. This is let's see. Okay, so yeah, oaks are one of the biggest, most important parts of the whole property. You can see I've got a lot of oaks that are spread all around. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm at a little out of order on my presentation, but first of all, I just want to talk about some of the plants that I think are the most valuable for planting. So coast live oak grows very fast, incredibly tough, difficult to kill, and it will make the entire garden much healthier. It creates just a massive amount of leaf mulch. It's more like a leaf litter. It's actually very cool. It's beautiful ground cover, and it'll make the entire garden healthier, and it's a beautiful plant. Poyans are also very easy to grow. They grow very quickly, very reliable, very durable, beautiful plants. San Diego Mountain mahogany grows where I live in the kind of inland area, but is also very common right along the coast. Just a spectacular plant, and you can see the lower left-hand corner. You get these beautiful sort of pinwheel-shaped seeds that are just truly amazing. When the sun is backlit, when the sun backlights them, it looks like just an amazing halo behind the entire plant. Okay, now some of the pictures, you can see how it all comes together. So this is what the front yard looks like, and got various different kinds of sages. Again, these are all plants that naturally belong where I live. A lot of different manzanitas, and these are Ceanothus tomentosus and Ceanothus crassifolius on the right there. Sycamores, bladder pods. In the middle, you see California grape growing up in an arbor, and there's a toyon next to it. And then in the right plant, the lower right-hand corner, you see more oaks, and in the back, white sage and Cleveland sage. The patio area, upper left-hand corner, it's actually a volunteer willow that had a bunch of, actually, one of the few non-native species that's growing a trumpet vine in it. So I do have a handful of non-natives that were there before I started planting natives, and if they can survive with the natives, then I usually let them survive, let them stay. You see in the middle, upper middle, this fountain with a bunch of plants that are growing through it. This is where all the birds tend to like to go. White sage on the right, more oaks, more Cleveland sage, and then just another view of the willow, and you see the pond behind it. And then the lower back, purple sages, black sages, riparian area with yerba mansa, a California Vermonti in the lower right-hand corner. And then this is the pool area, which I think is probably one of my favorite areas now. Like I said, it attracts so many birds, but it's also just, it's always a nice green little oasis. And you know, a lot of the property can get just a little bit brown, not very brown, but just a little bit brown. But the area in the pool is just always green and kind of, it looks like just an oasis always, and it's quite beautiful. And I have kind of a larger property, but my sons are all into native plants as well. And so this is what my son Jake did in a very small little property in Claremont. I think it's also really beautiful. Also, in this, he's growing exactly the plants that belong in his particular location in Claremont. So just before I finish up, you know, I created Cowscape mostly because I wanted it to be something that brings joy and happiness to a lot of people. Because there's nothing like a native garden. It's just so wonderful, and I thought everybody should enjoy it. But I did have an ulterior motive as well, and that is, we are rapidly, as I'm sure you all know, and can absolutely sympathize with, that we're destroying natural habitat at a very, very rapid rate in California, and particularly Southern California. So this is the black area shows the developed part or developed land, and it's just gradually pushing out more and more of the natural space to the point where at the current rate, there's not going to be that much left in 2100. However, we can, you know, by planting native plants and by creating our own little nature reserves in our property, we can slow down the process and hopefully even reverse it. Where every one of these, and I think, you know, I proved it with my own property. It isn't just kind of like, well, it'll be okay. It's not bad. It's not as good as the kind of nature you're going to see in a canyon somewhere. You can actually create a nature reserve that's every bit as good as good at attracting birds, at attracting insects, at attracting, you know, small animals. Even it can start to attract things like coyotes and bobcats. You can create a really truly amazing nature preserve that does protect the nature of our state and of our county, even as so much of the natural land is being lost to development. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. Take any questions?
Dennis, that was awesome. I have to say, just looking at these garden photos is like lowering my heart rate right now. I'm feeling very relaxed.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Over the last
Yeah,
couple of days, I spent a lot more even more time in my garden than I normally do.
I bet. And just a comment to what you were saying there at the end about losing natural habitat, and then we'll take questions. Uh, One of the things with Sierra Club that we try and work on a lot, especially going forward now, is with our North County coastal cities here, is trying to make sure that cities are designating open space and that we're making sure that there's enough green space in you know, as cities are building out their plans and all of that. And this just shows how important, I mean, if you could drive down his street and see what the rest of the neighborhood looks like, which is just green yards and green grass and palm trees, and then you pull up in front of his, and it's just like amazing to see how this space transforms. So it's really spectacular.
I remember when I started Calscape, I guess it was 14 years ago or so. You know, I told my friends that this is going to be a long-term project. You know, this is something that is going to go slowly, but eventually more and more people are going to start planting natives instead of palm trees and grass, and eventually it's going to be the majority, not you know, rare. And it's happening slowly, but already I just see from the number of people that are on Calscape, the number of people that come to my the garden tours, it is changing. There are more and more people that are kind of falling in love with this concept of nature restoration landscaping, and so I think it is going to make a difference.
Yeah, it's outstanding. So I think I can manage if people raise their hands. we can just take questions that way. And I know some folks came in late, and that's fine. We recorded the presentation, so we'll make sure that you get a chance to see that. So,
And there are some questions in the chat as well.
yeah. So John, I see you have a question in the chat, and then Mark, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. The presentation was interesting. I came in late because I'm juggling between office hours with my students. Had to take care of that. Anyway, your comment about trees bringing up groundwater. My situation is my groundwater is brackish at best, salt water at worst, and what impact that has as far as.
I've always been amazed at how bad the water quality can be and still have plants be able to thrive in it. Salt water, I'm not so sure about, but
Yeah.
that seasonal creek we have down at the bottom of the property, there's some nasty water a lot of the times. You see it's got gasoline, traces in it and trash, and it's bad. And the trees are just thriving. So I would guess that. Well, I think it's worth an experiment. And actually, if you give, I could do some research to find out a little bit more about oak trees and salt water, and see if I can find anything out about particular species for you.
Yeah, my other situation, I'm in a former avocado grove, and there's about 5 remaining avocado trees forming a ring around the property. So that's my main tree cover, other than the natives, the neighbor's ficus that they planted about 5 feet from the fence.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's good about neighbors that irrigate, or if you, like I have some orange trees.
Free water.
Yeah, it's free water. The native plants will reach their roots out to it. So it's those little designated riparian zones can be your neighbors and your irrigated crops, and they'll be as happy as can be.
Okay, thanks a lot. Great talk.
Thank you.
I see your hand up, but first, since it's right on point, Mark, you had a question about that very thing, about the water.
Yeah, I was asking how big your place is, because it seems like you're a little bit isolated from your neighbors in a way, or you have some distance between them. My lot's not as big, and my neighbors, the ones that water, they impact probably half my lot with water. But sorry, before I get to that question, let me just suggest to you, John, that you look and see what kind of things grow in the lagoons, because that water's brackish too. And to be honest with you, you don't see a lot of trees, right along the lagoon, a lot of big trees. There are some willows and things like that, and some non-natives, but that would be a good place to start looking for plants that don't mind a little salt.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. Yeah, you're I think that's a very good point. In Calscape, I'm pretty sure that there is a field where you can search for plants that tolerate salt. So, and I'm sure you're right that it's plants that you also see in the saltwater lagoons or near saltwater lagoons. But one thing, by the way, you brought up that it looks like I'm very far away from my neighbors. I've actually very strategically planted plants, so we're quite close to our neighbors. But with a few toyons and a few coast live oaks and San Diego mountain mahoganies, you never see them. They're invisible. So we can look out the window, and it seems like we're the only people in the world. We don't see our neighbors, which is just kind of nice. When you have a nature reserve, you don't want to see your neighbors.
Yeah, it sounds like those trees in particular enjoy your neighbor's water, like you say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paige, I know you had your hand up.
Yeah. Coincidentally, 2 hours ago, there was a CNPS webinar on native soils. So it kind of segued nicely into this. And I will say 2 things that they suggested along what you were talking about, Dennis, was about not disturbing the mycorrhizal when you're planting. So don't till your soil and don't use weed cloth. It's really bad.
Yeah.
But my question to you is, do you add mycorrhizal when you plant your natives or not?
Well, I have added mycorrhiza just because I like having the variety. Typically, I know Moosa Creek, and I'm almost sure that what's the native nursery that's down in the South Bay, Native West, I think.
Oh,
They add,
yeah, Native West.
yeah, they add mycorrhiza to their plants. So when you buy a 1 gallon plant, you put it in, you're adding mycorrhiza to your environment. Okay. I do, if I'm in an open space, I will occasionally grab a little bit of leaf litter and I'll bring it home and throw it under my trees, actually bury it a little bit under my trees. And so I think that has helped increase the number of mycorrhizal species and kind of mushroom species that you see. So I like to do that, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Any other questions? I will say most of the folks on this call are from the North County Coastal. So we would obviously have a different environment than what he's got in Poway.
Yeah.
And fog and all that other stuff. But I feel like where I am, sort of the inlandmost area of Encinitas, I'm almost as dry as Poway. Certainly
my son lives in Vista, and it's amazing. Everything seems to grow in Vista. It's perfect. So if you're like in that general area, like he's in West Vista, it's very mild. Still gets a little bit of rain, and everything seems to grow there.
Right. Right. Does anyone have any? Oh, Barbara.
Yeah, I would, I'd love to hear more ideas about adding the mycorrhizal. If you could talk a little more about that. You said you grab some leaves from wilder areas and bring them, and also I heard Paige say don't really till very deeply, if I heard that correctly. If you could talk more about that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, well, let's see. First of all, the mycorrhiza needs to grow on plant roots. So the single best way to do it is to buy 1 gallon plants that are already infected with mycorrhiza, when you plant them. So
how do you know that?
Well, you can talk to the nursery.
Okay.
But I know there's really 2 big wholesalers in San Diego County, Nature West and Moosa Creek, and they inoculate all their plants. And you can confirm with your nursery as well. But yeah, you definitely that's where it starts. If you just take a little bit of leaf litter from an open space, and under an oak tree in an open space, and you put it in the middle of open dirt, it's going to die. It needs to be in plant roots. So if I am going to add more mycorrhiza, I will just get some leaf litter, and I'll put it in a hole where I'm adding a new plant, and then I'll put the plant on top of that. But I don't do that much. I mostly rely on the mycorrhiza that comes from the nursery. The other thing is, once it's there, mycorrhiza, the reason that it's symbiotic with plants is because it needs carbon. It needs leaf litter. So basically the symbiosis is it gets carbon/leaf litter from the plants, and then in exchange, it gives the plants better access to water and micronutrients like magnesium and iron and all the micro elements, micronutrients that plants need, and there are a lot of them. So basically, it's a two-way symbiosis, but you need to give the mycorrhiza leaves and carbon. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll add leaf litter from an area where there's plenty of leaf litter, and I'll put it all around the new plant, and that will increase the amount of carbon that's getting excuse me, that gets into the mycorrhiza, and it'll increase the health of the mycorrhiza, and the whole plant will grow faster. And as a plant reaches its roots out, you'll see, instead of just a, 6-inch by 6-inch ball of mycorrhiza, it just spreads out across the entire garden. And so, you can actually see the mycorrhiza in the winter. It's much easier. It's kind of white fibers that are around the root balls. If I dig in my property, it's everywhere. The roots everywhere. There's mycorrhiza everywhere. It's, killing the weeds. It's retaining moisture. It's providing the micronutrients to the plants and popping up mushrooms. It's very cool. So that's kind of what you want to do, is get the mycorrhiza right around the root ball of your new plants, and then depending on the plant, the infected plant, the plant with the mycorrhizal infection, to spread the roots out everywhere.
For those people who have children still at home or grandchildren, sounds like a great science project.
It's very cool stuff.
Yeah.
Mycorrhiza is amazing.
Emily.
Thank you for the presentation, Denise. And I had a question. You mentioned soil drainage. Is there an easy way to check the drainage in like a specific? I mean, I feel like in the property, like there is like different drainage, and I don't know exactly how I can check that.
Yeah, the easiest way is to dig a 1-gallon hole. So you dig a 1-gallon hole and then you fill it with water. And actually, I always do that when I'm planting plants anyway, just because you want a little bit more water in the in that hole. It's going to be a lot easier for the plant to get going fast if it starts out wet.
Okay.
They say there's only one time that you can't water a plant too much, and that's right when you plant it. So fill it up, and I don't know if there's any hard and fast rules for how long it takes, but something like if it drains in less than 15 minutes, it's considered fast draining, let's say, and if it's 15 minutes to an hour, it's medium. And if it takes longer than an hour, it's slow draining.
Right.
Thank you.
There is one other thing to look at, though. It's slopes. Slopes pretty much always count as fast draining, because the water, we really don't get water that's kind of going into it very quickly. So that's why most California natives grow on slopes, because they don't like slow draining soils. Ceanothus, for example, they're famous for needing fast drainage, and they can still grow in clay soil if it's on a slope.
Right. And I will say, just like as an example on my property here, when the house was built way before, back in the 70s, I think they dynamited to do the pool because it was all, granite, and they took all that rock, dumped it beside the pool, threw some dirt on top of it. So it's literally rock. And you can't believe the manzanitas that can grow in that rock. It's insane. They love it. So it's like the absolute epitome of terrible soil, bad, like you would think nothing could grow there. I see that there's another question about where you get your native plants and if there's nurseries you recommend.
Okay, yes. I get my plants from Moosa Creek. They're up in Escondido. A great nursery. And so I get them directly from Moosa Creek. They also sell through Walter Anderson. So that's another good source. They'll have a very good, in most Walter Andersons, I think they have a very good offering. There is a nursery that is in Encinitas. I can't remember the name of it now.
Anderson's on La Costa. It's a small little like family nursery, and they have a native plant section that's all mostly from Moosa Creek. Mm-hmm. And they'll also order anything you want for you. So
right. Neil's on Acadia also.
That's the place I was thinking of.
Neil's on Coast Highway.
I've actually never bought a plant for them, but I follow them on Instagram, and they have amazing selection of plants. There's plants that I keep on meaning to go to the coast to pick up a couple of plants from them. But there's fantastic offering.
There's Green Thumb in San Marcos too. Green Thumb supplies Moosa Creek plants.
Okay.
Oh, and
Tori goes to all of the nurseries in Southern California. She goes all the way up to Theodore Payne and Santa Barbara and brings plants back from all of the nurseries in Southern California. So she's got stock from all of the nurseries down to the border.
Oh, and one thing, probably the best resource is Calscape. Go to the nursery section at Calscape. You can find out exactly what nurseries are. They've got a dozen or so nurseries that they'll point out in San Diego, and every plant page, they will also show you what nurseries carry that plant. So, and you can even specify it. So it'll show you the nurseries that are near you.
One other point that I wanted to highlight, which people might not have noticed from the slides, is one of the coolest things about the Dennis's property is the driveway, where you pulled out the regular driveway and put in, what did you put in? It's basically permeable, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
all rock or
Yeah, it's just pavers. They're like 3-inch by 3-inch by 3-inch cubes, and kind of created a paver pattern, and it allows water to soak through.
yeah,
So
and it's all done like very artistically with swirls and
yeah, it's called a flying arch, which is a really common paver pattern in Europe. I used to live in Spain, and I thought it was amazing. So it took me a long time to figure out how they actually did it, but finally figured it out, and were able to duplicate it in the front yard.
right.
Well, Sally, one other thing, just to let people know, you can order online at Moosa Creek and they will deliver to your local nursery. So if you have specific plants you want.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And another fun place to go for just like if you have the time to get up there is Tree of Life Nursery.
Yeah.
It's a fun place to walk around and see what they have. And they also do some interesting seminars sometimes, or plant projects or whatever.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
They will be closing in a year.
Is that right? Oh,
Yes,
No.
they're both retiring, so they will be closing.
Are
Get up
they?
there while you can.
What's happening to that property?
It's going
I
to
don't wanna
become
know.
part of a preserve.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
And did you have something? I think I cut you off. Okay. So just one other comment I think I mentioned in the beginning, in Encinitas, we are working on a native plant ordinance, and that's like a big effort with lots of people, including a couple of city council members, and there was an ordinance that's being worked on, and there was funding put in the budget for this year. So they've started to get proposals from people to create a demonstration garden, so that people can start to understand, like, oh, this is how it can, since everybody can't drive out to Poway and see Dennis's garden, we're trying to think of creative ways to get people interested in doing this locally. And again, it's all part of an effort to think about, okay, how can we create more habitat just in our own backyards and space, especially as, we know that there's a lot of big developments going in and we're losing a lot of that space. And so that's something that we hope to sort of push, if we can, into some of the other cities that would be open to that kind of thing going forward, because I think it's a great way to start to get people more engaged in the whole process.
That's awesome.
So one of the things we'll be focused on as the year progresses, the new year. So Carl, were you raising your hand?
Yeah, just the ordinance in Encinitas, is it saying that, what is it actually doing? Is it allowing people in an HOA where they wouldn't have previously been, or
it's geared for properties, bigger developments that are adjacent to natural space, really, to try and make sure that we're not having a lot of invasives going in, for instance, near a lagoon. And like right now on La Costa Avenue or La Costa Boulevard, there's a couple of developments that are part of the housing element that are going in that are larger than your typical development. And there is some concern about what would be planted as part of that. And, you know, what is that going to be up against an open space? And we're also trying to work through the Planning Commission, which I might know someone who I just berated today as he went out the door to the meeting about getting it on the work plan to make a more substantial ordinance for some of the other development that's going on in the city. Like, for instance, there's some of these big giant developments that are being put in, and they're taking out some really large trees. And right now the city code is you only have to put in a 15-gallon tree to replace that tree. So you take out a 100-year-old Torrey pine or oak tree and you replace it with a 15-gallon tree. Well, it's great that they're putting in those native trees, but, you know, these big developers they have the wherewithal to put in much larger trees and to help that process along. So it's also directed at some of the big development that's going in.
Thanks.
So with that, I just want to say thank you again. We did record this and we'll send out, if it's okay with you, Dennis.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll send this out to everyone who signed up, and you know, thank you everyone for attending tonight. And I will just mention there is still a few days left for our executive committee elections. I think it's the 10th or 11th is the deadline. So if you want to weigh in, a couple of us are on the up for re-election, and so you can go onto the San Diego Sierra Club chapter site and do that, find out how to do that. So just FYI. But again, thank you. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.